Oda just dropped what is easily one of, if not the most insane chapters in all of Egghead so far, which is really saying something given the reveals that we've gotten during this arc. So if you have not read One Piece chapter 1094 just yet, then you need to go do so like right now, because where else could I possibly start this review than with the reveal of Saturn's new form, which I don't think is actually a devil fruit. We'll talk about why in just a minute, but this surpassed pretty much all my expectations, starting with the random dark incantation circle thing that summoned him in the first place, and then seeing that Saturn has some kind of half spider, half bull form, likely tying to the Gyuki or Ushi Oni, which was pointed out during my live reaction by AWJX, as well as some other people. So as usual, you know we're going to dive deep into some theories on what exactly this all could mean from this chapter, but throughout the video, you're also going to hear me discuss some comments from different people from my live reaction, as well as from my Discord, and if you want a chance to get your ideas in a video just like they did in this one, then make sure to check out my next live reaction on my main channel, or just go drop some thoughts in the Discord after that reaction happens, and then I'll pick up the best ones and talk about them during a video just like you're seeing here on this channel. Which, by the way, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. But before I get to those ideas, I want to cook for just a little bit on what I think just happened in this chapter. And I think the biggest connection that we need to make to all of this is that this summoning circle is just like the one that Brook landed on in Namakura Island during the time skip. It's almost like Saturn used a similar mechanic to actually summon this form of himself by using this circle with the 5 fives, likely tying to the 5 Gosei. I've heard some ideas floating around that maybe each Gosei could have a different number, or maybe they'll each have 5 fives on their own circle since they're collectively the 5 Gosei, and I just want to say I doubt those numbers are going to connect to power levels or anything like that, but I do think they're each going to have different numbers because you need different summoning circles to summon different things. And Saturn probably has the number 5 because Saturn is the 5th closest planet to the sun if you don't count the Earth, which none of the Gosei were named after the Earth, meaning that could tie to Emu, but that's a whole other story. So I think as we go down the list of planets, each of the Gosei will be summoned with that corresponding number. And again, it's not about power levels, it's just about where they are in the order of planets in the universe. So Warcury is probably going to be number 1, Venustro will probably be number 2, Mars will probably be number 3, and then Jupiter will probably be number 4. And all of them will be different creatures as well, I think. But the reason that these people on Namakura Island did this in the first place was specifically for some kind of demon summoning ritual. And not only did Brook land right in the middle of that circle, which made them all believe he was actually summoned, but he is the one character in the story that we can say for certain has actually been to the Underworld. At the time, it was kind of an ironic joke from Oda, I think, but after seeing what we saw in this chapter, we need to take another look at this. Brook also looks like a typical depiction of the Grim Reaper, which just kind of adds to this whole thing. And I mean, Brook died and came back to life. He is a living example of a soul that essentially returned from the Underworld. The reason he has ice attacks at all is because he channels the chill of the Underworld. Oda is trying to tell us something here with this connection. And a fun idea from Mr. Bushido in the Discord was that Brook appearing in this moment like he did may have interrupted the true ritual and maybe unironically saved everyone simply by stopping the summoning of something much worse. Something like Saturn that may look different but still cause mayhem all the same. Maybe the paw print itself disrupted the real summoning since it did kind of damage the floor there. But Brook appearing all of a sudden kind of threw us off from the fact that it may have been a legitimate ritual in the first place. And to tie that circle back to Egghead even more, Brook was sent there with Kuma's paw powers, someone who's extremely relevant in the Egghead arc as it is, and might even be arriving there soon as well. And this dialogue at the end of the chapter seems to imply that Saturn was the one who specifically gave the orders to make Kuma lose his full personality. And there's this famous painting of the Roman god Saturn that I want to bring up where he literally eats his son. And I want to give a shout out to KevDOG for bringing this up in a discussion that we had after his reaction on his channel, which you can find a link for down below. But the reason that this is relevant here is that while the One Piece Saturn doesn't have a son here necessarily, or at least one that we know of, Kuma is arriving and may kind of fill that mold since Saturn seemed to be the one to order Vegapunk to make Kuma into what he is today. The reason we have Cyborg Kuma may be because of Saturn in the first place. If Kuma really is on his way to Egghead after what we saw with Akainu, could he maybe have one last hurrah and save his daughter Bonnie, but in the process get eaten or at least just killed by Saturn to fit this parallel? I mean, half of Kuma's face got blown off by Akainu as it is, so having the other half get eaten by Saturn might be kind of fitting, and maybe even necessary since Kuma is almost a full robot, and maybe the head is essential in order to actually kill him or something, since he isn't a normal human at this point. But let's go back to that black circle for a second. Is what we just saw in this chapter a successful version of what that Satan-worshipping tribe from Brook's timeskip wanted to do? Were they performing a ritual that actually does work in some way, but with Oda being Oda, he had Brook fill that role to kind of dissuade us from the truth at first? I mean, this idea is kind of borderline bordering almost on the side of magic, which isn't really something we see a lot in One Piece, because while the devil fruits do give abilities that are kind of magical, it seems like there's some kind of science connected there as well because they can be duplicated. But with Oda being who he is, I think there could be some explanations that still fit within the confines of things we've already seen. Like I mentioned, Brook has actually been to the Underworld, so it's a physical place somewhere in the universe of the One Piece world, and when Saturn first spawned from that circle, he did say, "I can't remember the last time I came to the surface." On face value, this could mean that Saturn doesn't remember the last time he left Marijois and touched ground on another island among the commoners. However, I think that might just be what Oda wants us to think. Instead, maybe this form is saying that it's been in the Underworld for a while, and it's coming back to the surface for the first time in a long time. I mean, the Underworld should literally be under the world, so coming to the surface kind of makes more sense in that regard. Oda loves doing this kind of double entendre stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case here as well. So if this thing literally was summoned from the Underworld somehow, then what does that mean for Saturn's form? Is this a devil fruit, or is this something else altogether? Well, I'm sticking with my idea that I briefly mentioned in this ancient weapon theory on the main channel, and that's that the Gosei are actual creatures that are taking a human form, either through human fruits or some kind of other means that we have yet to see. So this half spider, half bull form that we're seeing could be the real Saturn basically, and the human body that we've seen up to this point could be just some kind of face or physical manifestation, kind of flipping the idea of zone fruits on their head a little bit. I mean, when people use zone fruits in Awaken, the summoning mechanic there is nothing like what we saw from Saturn. And now I can understand he has the god ribbon looking thing, which we tend to associate with zones, as well as these swirls and all of that, but this just isn't how zones work. Even when Luffy awakened, it was nothing like this. So what I think could be happening is that this isn't Saturn with a devil fruit based on this creature, but rather Saturn just is the actual creature itself. The devil that would have been imbued into a devil fruit is what we're seeing, which ties it all back into the Underworld stuff that we talked about earlier. I mean, Saturn did say Nika as Luffy was falling, which is an interesting contrast to Zunisha, who said Luffy was Joy Boy. Like Fancy Top Hat Dude said in my comments, does this maybe hint that Saturn is even older than we thought? Is he aware of things from even further back than Joy Boy's time? And I think this could all tie to Robin as well, and thanks to Saran Wrap here for mentioning some of this, but it mainly revolved around how Robin turned into a literal demon while fighting Black Maria, who is another spider fruit user by the way, which ties back into this whole Saturn thing. And also, we saw Sanji with the Lady Radar in this chapter, which is basically what we saw him use in Onigashima that led him to Black Maria in the first place. And now he used the Lady Radar for Bonnie, and it led him right to another giant spider person in Saturn. Robin obviously wants to uncover the true history of the world and is one of the biggest enemies for Imu for that reason, and Oda also associated the Straw Hats with different flowers, where Robin was tied to the White Lily, which is fitting since Lily seems to be at the forefront of some kind of major blunder that went against the world government. Imu was also shown in a room with flowers during their introduction, so there's a lot of weird potentials here, I think. Just like how Robin used the flower fruit to bloom herself into a devil, is Imu blooming this creature that we saw Saturn as or something? Or is Saturn doing that maybe remotely from the ship? Is there some kind of connection between literally becoming a devil if you have to, and summoning things that seem to be as if they're from the literal underworld? I think a lot of people picked up on the fact that when Imu used their first physical attack in the story, it looked kind of like a devil's tail. So maybe there is something to all of this that really makes Imu tied to the underworld as well. Could Imu be like the original ruler of the underworld, the true king of hell in a way, thus bringing Zoro's role back to the forefront too? And that's another connection I wanted to bring up, and I think it was the Blackman Who Laughs who commented this during my time on Kev's stream, but remember that bandit on the bridge that Zoro fought during Wano, the one who ended up being the fox named Onimaru? Well, there's some kind of insane connections here, because the bandit form that we met was named Gyuki Maru, which starts with Gyuki, the name of the yokai that Saturn is likely based on, and the fox that thing truly was named Onimaru, and its master's name was Ushimaru. Those two prefixes together would make up Ushi Oni, which is another name for the Gyuki yokai I just mentioned. And remember, Ushimaru is a swordsman that is almost definitely related to Zoro and also has bulls on his cloak, thus matching the Ushi in his name. I don't know if this means that Zoro will eventually fight Saturn or anything like that, because the Gandhi Gosei guy, who I know we have the true name of, but I still like Gandhi more, seems like a better matchup given the swordsmanship and everything. But maybe this Ushi Oni connection stuff to Zoro is just a bigger play on Zoro's connection to becoming King of Hell or something. I mean, in this chapter, we even saw a reference to the river Styx, or the Sanzu River, which is the Buddhist equivalent to that, and Bonnie used a new attack called NDE, or Near-Death Experience, which made these Marines look a lot like Brook. So Oda was flirting with the underworld in several different ways with this chapter as it was, even outside of that circle that we saw from Saturn. So my guess for right now at least is that Saturn literally is this creature that we're seeing, and it's being summoned from the underworld via this circle thing. It's the devil in the devil fruit incarnate. The human form of Saturn that we've seen this whole time is probably just some extension of this being, and maybe the devil fruits kind of represent the opposite of this whole thing, because with devil fruits, the humans control the entity instead of the reverse, right? You eat the fruit and get powers of that thing. When it comes to Saturn, could it be that instead of humans eating devil fruits, the devils ate the humans at one point? Like my guy Michael Evans was pointing out, maybe the devil of the fruit controls Saturn's flesh basically, which could make Saturn's line of in the flesh to Vegapunk have an extra layer to it. The devil itself, this creature that Saturn truly is, doesn't usually appear in the flesh, and instead uses the flesh of some kind of host or something, which is the human form that we see. As for what that creature truly is, there's a few clear connections here to some folklore. Like I mentioned a few times, there's a Gyuki or Ushi Oni, which is usually depicted as a bull's head on a spider's body, and these creatures are also carnivorous and do eat people, so that might connect back to the Saturn eating Kuma idea from earlier. And Cosmic Goatee also mentioned another yokai that is often depicted as working with the Ushi Oni called Ona. I might be butchering that pronunciation, but you can probably see the connection to potentially Neurona, like what we believe to be Imu's true family name. The Ona also eat humans for what it's worth, by the way, and they're essentially sea serpent mermaids, you could think of them as. They are powerful, but they also use trickery to capture their prey. Like for instance, they might ask someone to hold their baby, and then the baby becomes as heavy as a boulder, so then the Ona can get their target very easily. But like I said, the weird thing is that this yokai is often connected to the Ushi Oni, or the Gyuki. And the fact that these yokai are connected, and this is the first Gosei that Oda has shown us to this degree, has me thinking there might be something we can read into about this about Imu. I'm gonna talk a lot more about this in a future main channel video, so definitely go subscribe there if you haven't already, but just know that I think Oda's absolutely doing something here with the Underworld and Imu being connected. And if that's true, and there is a connection to the real Underworld and different yokai, that kinda ties into what we saw from Film Red with Top Musica, as DLRJSDND brought up in the Discord. Now that wasn't said to be from a devil fruit or anything specifically, but rather it was some being that was freed because of Uta's devil fruit. Could the same thing be kinda going on here with Imu and the Gosei? Is Saturn basically a Top Musica-like demon that is controlled by Imu? And Josh also mentioned in my live stream how this could be a callback to when Saba was in Marijua and said he didn't know hell would be located at the top of the world. Oda keeps flirting with this idea of hell and the actual One Piece world combining in some kind of way. And I think that idea gets even crazier when you think again about Luffy dying before successfully awakening. Like that triggered Nika to be summoned in some kind of way, as Isaac also brought up in the reaction. Does death unlock some sort of gateway that has been maybe messed with in some way by Imu or maybe even the Ancient Kingdom? But then this leads me to another interesting observation. As I mentioned in that same Ancient Weapons video, which I really think you guys should go check out, the Gosei are named after planets, and the Ancient Weapons are also named after planets. The first Gosei's power that we've really seen has him as a half spider, half bull, and Poseidon is half human, half fish. If you haven't heard my Pluton theories before, let's just say that I think it's very likely to be half animal, half cyborg. So could every ancient weapon, or every being named after a planet, you could say, which might be one and the same, be a hybrid creature of some kind that is just immensely powerful for very different reasons? And this ties to an interesting comment from Aspie Memoirs that said the Gosei are like some kind of ultimate seraphim or pacifista. I mean, they all have numbers just like Frankie's creations do, so that kind of connects right away. And I mean, Oda did decide to show us the Science and Defense Division Gosei first, which ties right back into Kuma as I explained earlier. And that also ties to the pacifistas and stuff, so that is a very interesting observation. Now, I've heard before that the Gosei could be like Imu's satellites, kind of like how Vegapunk has satellites, and so maybe there's some way to tie all of that together with this Underworld stuff. Just like Pluton was built in Water 7 and is known as the god of the Underworld, were the Gosei also created, but maybe in their case they literally connect to a god of the Underworld, being Imu, who is now the king of the whole world, I guess. But this leads me to one of my favorite connections about this chapter, and that's Zunisha. Now, why would I bring up Zunisha, you may ask? No, it's not because of Bluegrass's Ride fruit, which is super random, but Zunisha had a blunder of some kind 800 years ago, somewhat like Lily did. That's why Zunisha was commanded to walk around all this time, and why they are apparently tasked with eventually destroying the borders of Wano one day at Momo's command. And then once those borders are destroyed, it would release Pluton, the god of the underworld, into the rest of the world. So that has me wondering, was Zunisha maybe involved with releasing a true god of the underworld into the real world at some point in the past? Did Zunisha somehow destroy a border between this world and the underworld to let beings like the Emu and Gosei roam free? Just as it is tasked with bringing the correct god of the underworld back into the story now, did it accidentally do so for the wrong one back in the day? Lily's blunder was one that hurt the government, and it led to the poneglyphs being spread around the world somehow. So Zunisha's may be one that hurt the ancient kingdom and led various beings of the underworld to be spread around the world as well. And this also led me to think about Davy Jones' locker, which is the place that we tend to call the depths of the sea, or the underworld, or basically where you go to die if you fail out at sea. And we still don't fully understand the origins of the Davy back fight, but due to the name and what Robin told us during Long Ring Longland, there is probably some kind of connection. I talked in my Lafro Tale theory about how the first one may have been a fight to get Davy back, and that still could be true, but what if there was even more to it, like it was a fight to get Davy back from Davy Jones' locker, basically? What if somebody died and Joy Boy or someone in the distant past was able to travel to the underworld with the hopes of bringing someone back to life? However, they'd probably be met with some kind of opposition, I would imagine, and that might be who Emu was originally. Perhaps a Grim Reaper-like character that protected the underworld. But Joy Boy's proposition may have been something like, if I win, I bring this person back. If you win, you get to come back to the real world in my place. Kind of like how Davy backfights are about getting different crew members on your side. It could be a similar thing here, and this is how Emu got access to the real world if Emu really wasn't from Earth originally, or was from the underworld originally, whatever. Or maybe it's just some kind of crazy amalgamation of all these ideas, I don't know. But having a hero travel to the underworld to rescue someone close to them is something that we've seen tons of different times in many different folklores. I mean, think about the Hercules movie when he has to defeat Hades, which is one of my favorites as a kid, by the way. But that kind of idea exists in tons of different mythologies and tons of different instances. Joy Boy may have done the same thing by using some of the knowledge that the ancient kingdom had, and maybe that helped lead to the situation we are in today. Because we even learned in Egghead that there are 21 grams of soul that separate from you once you die, and Brook is living proof that there is some way to die and bring your soul back. Resurrection's definitely a sticky topic sometimes in manga. It's sort of like a taboo along the lines of time travel a little bit, but I think Oda can cook if he does it right. I mean, he did time travel well. Brook is already a resurrected person, and that worked out just fine. That's my favorite character in the story. And Luffy technically resurrected because his heart stopped beating for just a moment. So I think there's a good chance that delving into this taboo of the underworld and bringing people back is something that's going to be explored. I mean, the devil fruits seem to at least have some kind of man-made component, or at least they can be duplicated, which gives credence to that idea, I think. So the fact that there is a fruit that lets you come back from the underworld is some tangential proof that the ancient kingdom probably already figured out how to do that originally. But if this form for Saturn that we're seeing is something summoned from the underworld, then what does that mean for Saturn's human body that we've already seen back on the ship? Obviously with zone fruits, it's the same person who transforms into different things, but with this circle summoning this form, it seems a lot different than normal, right? So is his body still on the ship while he's like controlling this new form from a distance? Or I guess maybe he assumed his true form so the human body he uses just went limp or something? I mean, this could tie back to a lot of the shadow talk recently, and maybe that thing is like his shadow, and without his shadow, his body maybe passes out for a while, which is basically what we saw in Thriller Bark. And the reason I even bring this up is that we still need an answer for the shadow on Egghead from chapter 1075, one that I talked about in my last video on this channel and several on the main channel. I think this is still most likely to be Saturn, and after seeing him use a summoning circle thing, I feel like it's almost a lock that that shadow was actually Saturn. And since we know that his ship was really far away at that time, I'm wondering if Saturn's body is simply still on the ship right now and he just summoned the shadow thing separately. He may have been doing this the whole time. Like I said with the shadow stuff, it could just work a bit like Moria's Doppelman maybe, where there are two different entities kind of working together, and the Doppelman could form shadows into whatever shapes he wanted, so there's maybe something there. This is actually a topic that I'm going to talk a lot more in depth on my next main channel video, so make sure to subscribe. But it could also be tied to something like Miss Golden Week's paintings, which Nick Arctor also commented as well. And this could definitely make some sense, especially if some of those ink fruit theories could be true for Emu. I mean, shadows would work in a very similar way, I suppose. We don't have a great answer for what was up with Miss Golden Week's powers as it is, so maybe there's some kind of connection in all this. Like maybe the material in which the summoning circle is made of could matter, like if you use different paints or whatever. And maybe that's even tied to who controls the thing that's summoned. I mean, this is a brand new mechanic in One Piece, so I feel like everything's on the table. But let's switch back over to some predictions for future chapters. But I like what BeatGamer99 said, which is that Oda's just distracting us until the Iron Giant swoops back in that he cliffhanged us on a couple chapters ago. It would be kind of amazing to see that thing face off against Saturn in some kind of like kaiju Naruto-esque battle while the crew figures things out, because another important aspect of what transpired in this chapter is that the tides have really shifted. There's been a debate for a lot of this arc about who's gonna win here, like whether the Straw Hats will suffer defeat similar to Law and Kid, or will this be the moment that Luffy proves himself as an emperor and they fend off the government in this parallel to Sabaody that we're seeing. And I think there was a good while there where it looked like the crew had things under control, especially once we got back from the Shanks, Reverie, and Garp stuff. But now not only has Luffy exited Gear 5th, Saturn finally pulled up, at the same exact time no less. The Vega Tank and Vega Force seem to be out of commission as well, and a lot of the people that we need in order to leave the island are stuck on the bottom floor right now. And I'm interested to see just how banged up Kizaru is after that punch, because I'm sure it hurt, but I also doubt he's down for the count, right? I mean, that punch was similar to what Luffy did to Kaido when he stretched his head, but the unique thing here is that these stars also appeared around Kizaru's head. These kind of remind me of what we saw with Bonnie's power when she turned Vegapunk really young, and she said those were like a representation of the years lost or something. So I'm not sure how that could connect here, but I'm not sure where else to go with it, other than the fact the attack had the name Star in it, I guess. So given the situation, I can absolutely see the Iron Giant and maybe even Kuma getting in the way of Saturn, because our side needs an outside force to help out right now. Maybe the Iron Giant gets in the way in the meantime, and then after Saturn defeats it, Kuma shows up and probably dies, but maybe paws Saturn away at some point as well, kind of inverting Sabaody even further by pawing the threat away instead of pawing our crew away. And of course, as I mentioned in almost every chapter review, we still need to see the Blackbeard pirates get involved. We all know about Lafitte and Devon probably being the two on Egghead, but now I want to talk about the increased likelihood that Blackbeard himself appears. I still don't think he would have been on the original ship that we saw a while ago, but him arriving later on could make some sense if things continue to drag on for a while. Like if Blackbeard were to witness a summoning ritual like this, however the mechanics of that may work, could be a huge game changer for him going forward. I mean, what if he can summon other things from the underworld, like rocks himself or something? Blackbeard controls literal darkness, which does have its own gravity, which can even pull in light. And in fact, did you know that the closer you are to a black hole, the slower time goes for you personally? Someone near a black hole will age slower than someone on Earth if you're using the Earth's time scale, if that makes sense. And the only reason I bring this up is that time and light are huge factors on Egghead. I mean, yes, we have Kizaru with his light powers and also all the hologram stuff, but Bonnie can even change people's ages, and she was already tied to Blackbeard because of him capturing her over the time skip. Blackbeard definitely could have some kind of stake in what's going on here, even just beyond the Seraphim or Punk Records or something, which is what I think a lot of us have already predicted. And perhaps the reason he was chasing the Dark Fruit originally could finally be revealed. But that's about it for this video, and I just want to give a huge thank you to those who commented in the Discord or my live reaction. You guys obviously gave some amazing thoughts that made this video better, and if you're disappointed that you didn't make it in this video, please don't be, because there's going to be plenty more opportunities every single chapter, and I'm always looking for fresh ideas to shout you guys out with. So make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe go check out this dope Ancient Weapons video that I mentioned earlier over on the main channel, because it's pretty relevant to everything we just talked about in the Gosei and all that kind of stuff. But until next time, later.